Hello, everyone. My name is Erin Miss Jones, and I am a public health professional. I have about 4 years of experience working in STI, HIV prevention, outreach, and education. Currently, I work servicing the senior population and doing public health outreach and education revolving around senior citizen health wellness. So today we're going to focus on STI 101 and a little bit of chat about HIV as well. And so really my goals for this PowerPoint is to give you guys a general education about sexually transmitted infections, a little bit about, we'll talk about prevention, and then other things that we can do to advocate and take care of ourselves and our community when it comes to sexual health wellness. So what I like to do throughout my PowerPoints is ask questions and get people engaged. Unfortunately, due to COVID, that won't be happening. So I'll, show you guys some questions and I'll provide the answers to them as well. So let's go ahead and jump in. First question, truth or nah? Do you all believe that the STI is the same thing as STD? And if so, what does STI, or what is STI an abbreviation for? Is it A, sexually transferred incident, B, sexually transmitted infection, or C, sexual thought infection, D, sexually transmitted immunodisorder? And I'll give you a little Jeopardy time. Do, 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 do. And the answer is sexually transmitted infection. And so we'll talk a little bit about STI and STD. Next question. You can always tell someone has an STI by looking or smelling them. True or false? We'll get some Jeopardy music going. Do, 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 do. This is false, okay? So you cannot always tell that somebody has an STI by looking at them or smelling them, okay? So let's talk a little bit about STIs and STDs. So sexually transmitted diseases, or STDs, sometimes called sexually transmitted infections, they are the same. What we want to do is have people gravitate more towards stating STI due to the fact that most of the infections that people contract from sex are curable or treatable. And since they are curable or treatable, they qualify as infections and not diseases. In the US alone, there are approximately 20 million cases, new cases each year of STIs, and about half of those cases happen amongst young people ages 15 to 24. So when we talk about the importance of understanding different STIs and, just their sexual health, it's very important that people, get the correct information and get the facts. And that's the purpose of this presentation. So, let's explore a little bit deeper into, ways that we can transmit STI, sexually transmitted infections, the different type of classifications they are. And then what we'll do is break down, what happens with some of the symptoms and some of the treatments that with these STIs. So sexually transmitted infections can be transmitted in a bunch of different ways, primarily through, that sexual contact, which can be through oral sex, which is sex you putting your mouth on someone putting their mouth on you. Anal sex, which is sex in, on, or around the bottom or the rectal area. And then vaginal sex, which can be penetrative sex, so penis to vagina, or scissoring, vagina to vagina, and then skin to skin contact. So coming into contact with, a sore, a lesion, or some type of outbreak, sharing needles for any reason. So that can be needles for tattooing, piercing, intravenous drug use, and then we talk about possible medical exposure from professionals, getting pricked with infected needles. And then from mother to child. So a mother can transmit some of these STIs through the birthing canal to her child. And when we talk about the symptoms with STIs, what we will see throughout this entire PowerPoint is that oftentimes people do not experience any symptoms. So what you guys will see time and time again is the word asymptomatic. throughout our PowerPoint. Asymptomatic means without or no presentation of symptoms. And when we do see symptoms for a lot of these STIs, what we're going to notice is that they are similar to each other, or they're similar to other things when it comes to health issues that we deal with on a regular basis, such as the cold, the common cold, the flu, you know, skin rashes, things of that nature. So when we talk about classification, classification really helps the medical professionals understand what happens with our STIs. And so those infections will be bacterial, viral, parasitic. Some of these STIs will be curable, other ones will not be. So let's look at a truth or not question. Do you all believe that blue waffles is one of the most common STIs in the United States? Truth or not? I'll give you some Jeopardy time. Okay, so blue waffles is actually a internet myth, and this statement is false. Okay, blue waffles is, you know, somebody with some very, you know, crafty, what is it called? I can't think of the editing program, but some crafty skills on, you know, putting some things together and making something look very scary on the internet when it comes to people contracting a certain type of sexual transmitted infection. Blue waffles is a big one on the internet that people are afraid of in the real world, and it's not true. Blue waffles is not an STI, and it's not the most common STI in the US. We'll talk about the most common ones as we go along. So common STIs are pubic lice, also known as crabs, trichomonas or trichomoniasis, also known as trick, chlamydia, gonorrhea, syphilis, mycoplasma genitalium, also known as MG, herpes, herpes simplex 1 and herpes simplex 2, human papillomavirus, also known as HPV, hepatitis C, acute and chronic type, and HIV, which is the virus that causes AIDS. So truth or not, do you all believe that you cannot get an STI if your partner is a virgin? Oh, Jeopardy music. No, this is false. All right. So you cannot get an STI if your partner is a virgin. This is false. You can get an STI if your partner is a virgin. So if we go back to the ways that STIs, in which STIs can be transmitted from one person to another. When we talk about people being born with certain STIs, we talk about potentially your partner may not be having sexual activities, but they may be participating in, you know, intravenous drug use where they're using needles, or, you know, getting tattoos and piercings, you know, at a person's home or an establishment that isn't a licensed tattoo shop or piercing shop. You know, when we talk about skin-to-skin contact, so even though people may not be doing anything penetrative, they may be, you know, doing things that put them at risk when it comes to skin-to-skin activities that isn't penetrative sex. So even though your partner may identify as a virgin, some of the other things or factors that may be happening in their life could potentially put them at risk for STIs. All right, so the first group of STIs we're going to cover are the curable ones. So crabs, this thing is moving on now. Crabs, trick, chlamydia, gonorrhea, hepatitis, syphilis, and mycoplasma genitalium. So pubic lice. So pubic lice is a parasitic infection. So that means that this is caused by a parasite or a little creature that you could actually see. So this is not the same type of lice that we see in our heads. This is a different type of lice. It likes to live in thick, coarse hair. So often found in, of course, the pubic area, armpits, eyelashes, beard, mustache, and other coarse hairs, but not in the head. And so the symptoms that are commonly seen with folks with pubic lice often come from the animal feeding off of you or biting on you. And that usually happens within 5 days after the person gets the crabs. That itching is caused by that allergic reaction to the animal biting off you. And so what the animal is doing as they're feeding on you is they're allowing themselves to live, to thrive. So they need to feed off of the human blood in order to continue to live in that area. So some things that, you know, people may experience, they actually, you know, may have sores, they may have itching, they may see, you know, brownish or rust-colored thing, I'll say flakes or something like that, like in their private area, and that's because the animal is shedding its skin. And they resemble the crabs you see on the beach. So like they have like those little arms, and it really takes, you know, a doctor to actually, you know, get like a magnifying mirror to actually see what's happening in the genital area. Some other things that may happen is the person may experience a mild fever or tiredness, especially if you've been bitten by, you know, a large number of lice. And people often ask, well, how do we get lice? Lice can come from skin to skin contact, so it isn't always through that sexual activity. What can happen is, you know, lice can live on, you know, dirty linens, dirty bed sheets. It can live on dirty towels, clothing. So, you know, depending on, you know, how severe another person has an infection, the lice can begin to live on, you know, other things that may be shared, you know, in a household, or, you know, in a facility that could be passed from one person to another. But oftentimes people transmit it, you know, through that sexual contact from one person to another. Treatment for lice will be either some medicated wash or some over-the-counter wash from that you can get from like the Walgreens or the CVS. The doctor may recommend that you, you know, shave the area that has had the infestation, and then also get rid of, you know, any clothing, linens, towels that, you know, may have come into contact with the lice during that time, and that's either getting rid of them or washing them, you know, in a way that kills the lice in the washing machine. So this is curable, but it can, you know, cause, you know, some irritation and frustration if it does not get treated. All right, trichomonas, so trichomoniasis or trick is a common STI as well. This is also a parasite. So this parasite crawls up inside of the human reproductive system. So it's a microscopic parasite that you cannot see. And so different from crabs, you know, you can see the crabs, you can't see this one. And so what trichomoniasis does is it gets up inside of the vagina or inside of the penis, and it begins to disrupt the natural habitat that's happening inside of those areas, and creating an environment in which it can thrive and survive. And so with it doing that, it begins to cause some of these symptoms. Now, the interesting thing with trick is that there's only testing for women and not for men. And so when a woman goes in and gets tested for a trick, which could be through a vaginal exam or possibly, you know, a urine sample to look at, you know, what's happening within the vaginal canal. If she's found to be positive for trick, it's likely that she's transmitted to her partner, and both the doctor will give the woman and the male partner medication to help clear this infection out of their system. So for women, the symptoms may show up within a week to almost a month after they've been exposed. And for most men, they don't experience any symptoms. And if they do, the symptoms may show up and go away. When we look at these symptoms, we see that what's often happens with women is going to be a burning sensation when they have to go to use the restroom, severe vaginal itching, you know, vaginal pain. When we talk about swelling in the labia, vaginal odor. So it's going to be a strong, very foul, fishy smell, and it's going to be consistent discharge that's coming out of the vagina. So it could be yellow, it could be green, it could be grayish. And then for men, the symptoms, not that many. Burning, you know, after they urinate or ejaculate, itching in the urethra area, and possibly, you know, some discharge coming out of the urethra, either when, you know, they urinate or just, you know, throughout the day. So these are some of the common symptoms with trick, but trick is treatable. And women can, you know, like I said, go get tested for it. But, you know, when we talk about complications and not getting these things treated, you know, the constant disruption of the bacteria in this area can, you know, put you at risk for contracting other STIs, and, you know, just, you know, cause general discomfort when we look at these symptoms and those things not getting treated. All right, so chlamydia and gonorrhea, I see it says chlamydia here, but I'd like to talk about them both together because these infections, they are pretty much twins when it comes to how they act inside of the human body, and the things that they do when it comes to the symptoms and just the way that they navigate throughout the human body. So when we look at what women experience when it comes to symptoms, we look at that percentage, we see that about 75% of women are asymptomatic when it comes to chlamydia, and about half of men are asymptomatic when it comes to chlamydia. For most people that experience symptoms, those symptoms may happen within 1 to 3 weeks after they become exposed. And those symptoms for women is going to be a vaginal discharge and a burning sensation during urination. For men, what makes chlamydia unique from gonorrhea is that with the chlamydia symptoms, it's going to be a pus or watery discharge coming out of the penis. And it's going to be pain or burning sensation during the time when they have to urinate. Now, when we look at this infection and we see that, you know, these initial symptoms may happen, if a person does not get chlamydia treated, and they allow it to thrive and continue to infect their reproductive system, it doesn't only sit in the vagina, it doesn't only sit in the penis, it begins to spread throughout the entire reproductive system. And for both men and women, you know, this can, you know, cause some severe, irreversible, you know, issues to your reproductive organs. And so for women, when we talk about the chlamydia infection not getting treated and it reaching the fallopian tubes, we see, you know, some symptoms that may begin to happen is the lower abdominal or persistent back pain, pain during intercourse, bleeding between the times when they have their menstrual periods, and just feeling nauseated, fever, just not feeling like you're in the best of health. For men, when we talk about the infection, you know, moving beyond the penis and beginning to spread throughout the entire reproductive system, we see that that pain in the testicles and the swelling of the testicles, severe tenderness, much more than usual in the testes. And so at this point, when we talk about reaching fallopian tubes and reaching testes, what's beginning to happen is that the infection is starting to do irreversible damage, causing some scarring on the fallopian tubes, on the testes. And with that happening, you know, that puts a person at risk for not being able to have children or limiting their ability to, you know, have produce healthy eggs, have healthy semen when it comes to, you know, trying to have kids. So, you know, it's super, super important if we are having any of these symptoms, or we do believe we've been exposed to any STI, to get tested. So let's jump over to chlamydia in other localized areas of the body. So these things some of these infections don't only thrive in the reproductive areas. When we look at the rectum, the eye, urethra, and throat, we see that these infections can live in these places as well. Oftentimes with rectal infections, they can be asymptomatic for most people. And if they do experience any symptoms, it's usually going to be the inflammation of the rectum. So, you know, it's going to hurt really, really bad to use the restroom, anal or rectal itching. Those are usually the common symptoms with a person who has a rectal chlamydia infection. And this infection doesn't always have to happen with a person having anal intercourse. It can happen, especially with women, if they have an infection in the vagina and they go and wipe and use the restroom, and for whatever reason that discharge gets in or around the rectal area, it can cause an infection to travel there and infect the rectum. When we look at eye infections, a lot of people are like, how do we get an eye infection of chlamydia or of gonorrhea? Well, I always tell people, you know, go to your favorite Pornhub video, and it will likely show how a person can get an eye infection for chlamydia or gonorrhea. So when we talk about, you know, those finishing shots in those videos, those eye infections can happen that way. But also it can come from, you know, having the infection on your hands, on your fingers. So if you go and rub, somebody's area who has an infection in their private areas, and then you go and for whatever reason rub your eye, that could put you at risk. And then we look at the urethral infection, which is the area that we urinate out of. So, see the inflamed urethra, which makes it hurt to urinate. And then chlamydia, it doesn't really survive well in the throat, but it can. Usually most people have to have the symptoms. It's asymptomatic, and they get it mixed up with other things. But all of these things, can be treated with antibiotics. So these are curable, but when we're looking at these symptoms, we don't want them to last too long. All right, we want to make sure we're getting immediate treatment. All right, and gonorrhea, I'll quickly speak through gonorrhea. Like I said, it acts very similar to chlamydia. With gonorrhea, the only, I would say, I think unique difference for this particular STI is that when we look at this, most men and women are asymptomatic when it comes to gonorrhea. So that's something that's significantly, different from chlamydia. And when we look at how men experience gonorrhea versus chlamydia, we see that with gonorrhea, it's a yellowish, whitish discharge from the penis. So it's a constant, drip that's coming from the penis with gonorrhea for men. And then for women, pretty much the same discharge. It's going to be yellow, maybe a bit of blood mixed in there, but the burning or the inflamed urethra is happening with both men and women. And with men, it's unfortunate where you have to urinate more often than usual, but you go into the bathroom more often and it hurts or it pains. So, it's just a really bad, it's really bad mixed bag of symptoms that, people get with gonorrhea. And just like as I was stating with chlamydia, gonorrhea does not only sit in the vagina or the penis, it can begin to spread throughout our reproductive system. So, reaching the fallopian tubes for women and reaching the testes for men. As we can see, these symptoms are very similar to chlamydia. And just as with chlamydia, gonorrhea, anytime this infection reaches the fallopian tubes or the testes, it does begin to do some type of irreversible damage to those parts of our reproductive system. So, that's scarring, and that's, that damage can cause us to either have difficulty having children or not be able to have them at all. And just as we stated with chlamydia, gonorrhea can also be in other localized areas. Now, what we've seen in Memphis is an increased number of gonorrhea infections in the mouth or the throat area. And, people come into, the clinic with, that soreness of their throat, kind of like an inflammation of the throat. And depending on how long that infection has been sitting back there, when we talk about the regular bacteria that's in your mouth mixing in with an infection, you can only imagine the foul smell that's coming from, a person's throat or mouth, because, their mouth is trying to cleanse this infection out, or their body is, but it's just not working. So it's mixed in with the regular bacteria and then this, and it's just a whole little interesting hot breath mix that happens there when you talk about gonorrhea in the mouth or the throat. When we look at eye infection, the same way that chlamydia happens within the eye. And then rectal infections, most people who have a rectal infections, they're usually going to experience a lot of itching or severe pain at the time when they try to defecate. And so hepatitis C, I'll mainly talk about acute hepatitis C. When we get to chronic hepatitis, I won't go into too much detail because the symptoms are similar. The difference is with acute hepatitis, the symptoms are 6 months or less. Chronic hepatitis is 6 months or longer. So when we look at acute hepatitis, well, let's talk about hepatitis first. So hepatitis means inflammation of the liver. And so what our liver does for us is it helps to filter things out. It's like a grand central station for our body. Everything that comes through, the liver is helping to get things to filtered and making sure that, everything is operating, it's very best. And so when we talk about, disruptions to that, you get certain types of hepatitis. And with hepatitis C, you know, a lot of people, when we look at these symptoms, they get them mixed up with other things. Hepatitis C can be transmitted via sexual contact. Usually, you know, there's some type of infectious blood involved, hepatitis C infected blood that transmits from one person to another. So that can be, you know, through sexual intercourse. The heightened numbers that we've seen is usually through intravenous drug use, so the sharing of needles. You know, we see a lot of hepatitis clients, you know, get hepatitis that way. And then when we talk about alcohol use, you know, just the over consumption and just the abundance of use of alcohol, you know, we see, you know, these people that are dealing with that having issues, you know, with their liver and, you know, showing some of these common symptoms of hepatitis. And then, you know, I've even, you know, had conversations with nurses who have, you know, mistakenly gotten pricked by an infectious needle, and, you know, they've gotten hepatitis that way. So, you know, hepatitis, you know, isn't always a sexual infection that people contract. But the great thing is that, you know, we now have a cure for hepatitis. And so people are getting the treatment, people are getting better, which is fantastic. So if we look at some of these common symptoms, like I said, the loss of appetite, malaise, you know, fatigue, feeling nauseated, you know, vomiting every so often, abdominal pain. Usually the abdominal pain is a person, they're usually gonna be holding their stomach right there on that right side. And so they think they just have stomach pains, but it's really something is happening within their liver that's it's not functioning correctly. And dark urine, so where urine is almost, I would say, orange or brown. So again, you know, the liver helps to filter things out, and if that's not happening properly, you know, your urine is not, you know, getting filtered through. When we talk about jaundice, jaundice is a yellowing of the skin or yellowing of the eyes, and so especially, you know, I've seen this in like the work that I've done with people who are dealing with alcohol and drugs. You know, we see this a lot, and we can kind of tell, you know, whether somebody, you know, may be a severe alcohol user, and the eyes are very yellow, or even in people with, you know, darker skin, you know, we can see, you know, the yellowing of their skin. And then a rash or arthritis may happen at the onset of symptoms, and this is usually during the early acute stage. And the rash could, you know, show up in any part of a person's part of a person's body. But like I said, hepatitis, there is a cure for it. But it's very important that, you know, immediately when somebody is tested and they find out that they have hepatitis, that they do get into treatment. Because when we look at hepatitis moving from acute to chronic, you know, symptoms do get worse. And, you know, treatment is, you know, a lot harder when we talk about the irreversible damage that's happening to a person's liver. So it can become much, much more difficult to treat and make sure that that person stays, you know, well and live. So. All right, let's jump to syphilis. Syphilis is probably my favorite STI to talk about, just because syphilis is just a little sneaky creature. You know, it starts out as one thing, but it, you know, it's just kind of, you know, manifests itself into whatever it wants to. And so that's why I think syphilis is such an interesting infection. Syphilis can potentially work in 3 main stages in the human body if it goes untreated. And so let's look at some of those common symptoms. So for most people who contract syphilis, they remain in this primary phase, but some people, you know, may move along to the secondary. Primary phase, symptoms usually show up to about 10 to 90 days from infection. So that could be, you know, almost 2 weeks to almost 3 months. That's wild, right? Where, you know, you may or may not have symptoms of syphilis. And so when we talk about people experiencing symptoms, it's usually going to be your body is on high alert. And when your body's on high alert, there's an infection or something is off happening within our system. Swollen lymph nodes are going to happen. And so those lymph nodes are going to be, you know, we have hundreds of them in our body. So it could be, you know, feeling like you're swollen in your throat, under your arms, in your groin area. And it's just going to be, you know, they're going to be swollen, going to be like tender to the touch. But the key marker of syphilis is going to be that painless sore that could show up anywhere that's been exposed or come into contact with another person who has had the infection. And so that could show up on or around the penis or vagina, anywhere in that genital region, the rectum, the mouth, or the skin, anywhere on the skin, okay? And so most people, like I said, remain in this primary syphilis stage. But as we talk about, people maybe not being, aware of, things that are happening within their body, or, if these symptoms, they do kind of show up at a later period, and, the sore goes away, and then other things begin to happen, after that 10 to 90 day period, we can start seeing people having some experience of secondary syphilis. The symptoms that may appear after the sore heals, or weeks after the sore has shown up. And so this could be a rash on the soles of the feet or the palms of a person's hand. It could be moist patches on the mouth, the vagina, or the penis. And when I say moist patches, it's this wetness that's happening that's not like the usual wetness of the mouth. So you'll feel a patch that's happening in that area, whether it's the mouth, the vagina, or the penis. And then we look at the third stage. Okay, so most people, primary, secondary, they get treatment, they're good to go. This third stage, or the tertiary syphilis stage, is about 10 to 20 years after the initial infection happens. And so within this 10 to 20 year time frame, it's likely that a person has had a sore and they just, weren't aware of what it was, got it mixed up with something else, or just ignored it. That happens a lot. A lot of people just like, oh, don't know what that is, gonna move on, and they don't go to the doctor and get tested, and get themselves into care. So what can happen at this 10 to 20 year period is that we begin to see, and that's why I say syphilis is so interesting. We begin to see syphilis begin to work on the entire body. So it starts out as one thing, but it's like, let me just, manifest this destiny and take over, the entire human body. Let me try to figure out what I can do to become my best self. And so that's begins to spread to the heart. Syphilis begins to spread throughout your central nervous system. Syphilis will begin to, cause tumors on the skin, the bones, the liver. It can spread to your brain. We talk about, aneurysms. We talk about causing, difficulty with people having memory because, it spreads to certain parts of our brains. And so syphilis, is a very interesting STI. Most people get treated for syphilis with penicillin. If you're allergic to penicillin, the treatment can become in another form of penicillin. But as we see here, syphilis may lead to permanent disability or death. So, this is the only one that is curable, that can potentially lead to, some severe complications within your body or potentially death. So when you experience any symptoms, go to your primary care provider, go find your nearest testing location and get tested. All right, Mycoplasma genitalium. So this is a new STI. It was recently identified as an STI, I want to say back in 2015, 2016 maybe. Don't quote me on that. But Mycoplasma genitalium, a lot of people haven't heard of it. And that's because this STI, it's a bacterial. And so a lot of doctors, just identified it as a general, bacteria that folks, may come into contact with. But the reason it was identified as an STI is because that as more people were coming into doctors' offices and they were describing these symptoms that they were experiencing, and they were looking at the mucous membranes that have been, infected with these, they were seeing that more people are getting this bacteria via sexual intercourse. So when we look at, how often, symptoms develop and how that happens, usually about 1 to 3 weeks, but medical professionals are still learning about, this infection as a sexually transmitted infection. But what we've seen is that, a lot isn't known about the infection in either men or women. But for most part, when we have gotten, the information about how women, the symptoms that women experience, we see that for most women, it's an inflamed cervix. It's going to be a pain in the pelvic area. and some abnormal vaginal discharge that may be happening for men. A discharge from the penis, that burning sensation in the urethra, so it burns when you urinate, and an inflammation of the urethra, so difficulty in passing urine. Over 90% of men who have MG will not have symptoms. And so very similar to some of these other STIs, they won't know that they have one unless their partner goes and gets tested and lets them know that they have an STI. MG, mycoplasma genitalium, is treated with antibiotics. For most people, one series of antibiotics works for them. For some people, they do need a second series with this new bacterial infection. And I'll say this point as well, with MG, more cases were seen in Europe than they were in the United States, but there are growing numbers of MG in the US. All right, so here are some complications. I kind of covered some of those as we talked about the individual STIs, but you guys can just look and see some additional things that can happen when we talk about, not getting treatment from a medical provider. All right. So let's talk about the incurable STIs. I always call this Team H because all of them start with H's. So herpes, human papillomavirus, also known as HPV, chronic hepatitis C, and HIV, which is the virus that causes AIDS. Incurable, not curable. All right. So all these infections are viral. They are viruses, okay? Which means that they, once they're inside of the body, they are there for the long haul. So let's go to a truth or not question real quick. Here we go. You cannot get herpes from a toilet seat. This is true. All right, let's talk about herpes. You cannot get herpes from a toilet seat. This is true, okay? Herpes is strictly skin-to-skin contact. So herpes is an interesting little virus. So it's a family of viruses actually. There's herpes 1, herpes 2. I think there's herpes like 4, 8. There's different numbers, but of the herpes family, a lot of them do similar things. So chickenpox is a part of the herpes family. So when we talk about what happens with chickenpox, and then we look at what happens with herpes simplex 1, herpes simplex 2, just like if you were ever a kid with that contracted chickenpox, you know that your parents told you to stay away from other kids. They confined you to your room because that skin-to-skin contact will easily transmit chickenpox from one child to another child. So, you stayed away from other kids, while you were having your chickenpox outbreaks. You took the oatmeal baths, and you washed your hands, often, and until the sores were healed. That's when you could actually go and frolic around other children. It's very similar when we talk about herpes simplex 1 and herpes simplex 2, all right? So about 90% of people are unaware that they have this virus. Why is that? Well, I think a couple of things. One is that most people who contract herpes contract it when they are young. So that's usually, preteen, teenage years. And so, when we talk about, young people having education about their bodies and about health and wellness, they don't know, what this is. They may think this is just, more acne that they're experiencing as their bodies go through the hormonal changes of their teenage years. Or, when we talk about people misidentifying, herpes as, other things such as, people nickname herpes cold sore or fever blisters, when really, we should be calling it by its correct name, which is herpes simplex. And so another reason why too is people may have one outbreak and never have another one again, where the virus lays dormant in their bodies, and for whatever reason, some people have reoccurring outbreaks, and other people, they have that one time outbreak and they've never had another one. And so they aren't aware that they have the virus. They had an outbreak. They thought maybe it was an allergic reaction to something, because as we can see here, it often resembles pimples, blisters, abrasions, insect bites, and ingrown hair. For a lot of people, they do have reoccurring, outbreaks, and those outbreaks often happen when it is cold outside. So yeah, that's why they do call it cold sores. Or when it is severely hot, yes, that's when they do, call it fever blisters. And then, when we talk about lifestyle and how this virus, it lives in the nervous system. And so it does get upset by, stress. It does get upset by, different, things that may be happening in the body. So when, the human body and the nervous system, is reacting to something, that's when a lot of people see their outbreaks. And so really, when we talk about herpes outbreaks, it's about lifestyle management as much as it's about, trying to manage this virus with, some type of medication. Because it's not curable, it's something that you can only manage. So it's not something that, can be treated. So, for both the oral and the general infections, doctors may give some type of medication to help manage the outbreaks, whether that's in pill form or a cream form. And so I'm going on and on, but let me sum it up. So what happens when somebody initially experiences an outbreak with herpes? Usually before they have the outbreak, it's going to be an itching, a tingling, or a pain in the area where the sores develop. And so that happens before the outbreak occurs. And then the outbreak will show up. So it may be, a blister in or around the mouth, or a blister in or around the genital area. And then eventually it will crust over and heal like a scab. But during that time when the outbreak happens, just like I was saying with chickenpox, that is when a person is most contagious, most infectious. So, it's no sexual activity, no kissing, and limiting, things that, you may share, like, straws. We shouldn't really be sharing toothbrushes, but if you have an outbreak and for whatever reason you're sharing a toothbrush with somebody, don't share your toothbrush. So things like that, while a person is having an outbreak. It takes about 2 to 4 weeks for the sores to heal. And during that healing period, a person may be experiencing flu-like symptoms such as, feeling tired, fever, swollen lymph nodes. It just, depends on, what is kind of happening within their body if they do experience, because some people don't experience the flu-like symptoms, some people do. When we look at, the herpes sore, does it have to be present to pass to someone else? It does not. There is a small percentage of people who do asymptomatic shedding. Their bodies are just different. So there might not be, any noticeable symptoms or outbreaks that a person has, and they can still pass the virus on. So when we talk about, sexual encounters, protective barriers are always important, because even when people go and get tested for herpes, when we talk about the blood testing that happens with it, sometimes those tests are not 100% accurate. And that's why a lot of doctors don't like doing herpes testing. The only way that they would prefer to do it is when you have a visual outbreak and they can look and identify that as, herpes or as HPV. Because sometimes these two can look alike. But when we talk about the symptoms with them, they're totally different. So HPV is the most common STI in the United States. And why is that? Well, of the 100 different types of HPV, 50 of those are the types that we can get via sexual transmission. And so when we talk about, our sexual networks, our sexual partners, and we look at, how many different types of HPV it is, if you have had sex with a person and they've had sex with another person, if you used to have sex and you don't have sex anymore, or you're thinking about having sex with somebody, it's likely that, you have been exposed, or you likely will be exposed to someone with HPV. And that's because every time you're having sex, that's a 1 out of 50, 2 out of 50, 3 out of 50 possibility that you're exposing yourself to HPV. Now, I say that with all those 50 different types, not all of them cause cancer. And I want to make sure that people understand that of those 50 different types, they all, do different things and act in different ways. Just like I was saying with the herpes families of viruses, all of those viruses, you know, they do different things. They act similar with herpes, but with HPV, a little bit different with the 50 different types. So some types may be the type that cause genital warts. Some types may be the types that just show up as just abnormal cell changes inside of the human body. And then they may actually clear themselves out of the human body. And then there are some strains that are the cancerous strains. So it just depends on, you know, what type you come into contact, but all types of HPV are not cancers. So when we talk about getting tested for HPV, and we look here and we see abnormal cell changes of the cervix only seen in the pap smear. Pap smear will have abnormal test results. So only women can get tested for HPV presently. There is no test for men. Most men who have HPV, they only find out through the testing that women get, or if they have genital warts and they have a genital wart outbreak, that is a way that they are aware of it. But if they're not having warts and, you know, a woman goes and gets tested and, you know, she sees those abnormal cell changes and the doctor identifies them as HPV, if they, you know, are having unprotected sex, it's likely that she may have transmitted HPV to her partner, or her partner may have transmitted to her. And, you know, that awareness is brought to the forefront through testing. So when we talk about HPV, the strain that causes genital warts looks like cauliflower. It's just these smooth growths that are all clumped together. They're almost invisible. Most of the time, you know, people can identify them when they actually go for an exam at the doctor. But if they're internal, a lot of people know that they have genital warts because it's going to be a pain that's happening with the warts that are internal, so inside of the vaginal canal or inside the rectum. But they can be found on the vulva, vaginal canal, penis, scrotum, anal area, or rectum. When we talk about symptoms that people experience, those symptoms, as you know, listed here, could be dampness, vaginal bleeding, itching, increased itching that's happening in that area, vaginal discharge that could be happening as well. For most young people, I will say this, that most young people, they've received the Gardasil shot while they were young. So between the ages of, I want to say 13 and 25, most young people got the series of Gardasil that helps to protect them from the cancerous strains of HPV. So a lot of doctors, you know, when we talk about looking at the people who are living with the cancerous strains of HPV, we see it's more so our older senior population than it is young people, but that does not mean that the young people don't contract the HPV that is cancerous. And so when we talk about that particular type of treatment, you know, that's whatever treatment that, you know, your doctor identifies that works best for a person who has cancerous strain of HPV. All right, we already talked about hepatitis. And like I said, you know, with the persistent, you know, hepatitis not getting treated and the persistence of it, you know, these things can continue to happen. But we talk about potentially, you know, death that could happen as a person moves on through the different stages of hepatitis and that infection of the liver. So question, do you all believe that you can contract HIV or an STI through getting a tattoo or a body piercing? Hey, this is true. Okay. Next question. Let's see if y'all can get this one. I forgot to do Jeopardy on the last one. All right, here we go. You can get HIV from a mosquito bite. Truth or no? No, this is false. This is false. All right, so let's talk about HIV. This slide is just moving on through. So HIV is a human immunodeficiency virus, and it is the virus that causes AIDS. So HIV does exactly what it says its name says it is, right? So it's a virus that humans contract from other humans. So humans can't get dog AIDS or cat AIDS. It's a virus that humans contract from other humans that causes our immune system to become deficient or weaken, okay? And HIV is what people contract. AIDS is a stage of the HIV virus system, I guess, or whatever what we want to call it. So because someone has contracted HIV does not mean that they will get to the stage of AIDS. AIDS is the most severe stage of the HIV system. And so when we talk about what AIDS is acquired immune deficiency syndrome. And what that means, the word syndrome is just like a collection of symptoms or things that are happening in addition to what you've already been diagnosed with. So with HIV, a person has already been diagnosed with HIV. And so other symptoms that may have been acquired or other things that may have happened could have been a cancer, could be tuberculosis, could be, pneumonia, could be, some type of, respiratory condition. And then at that period, when we talk about AIDS, a doctor can only diagnose a person with AIDS. So it has to be some other thing happening on top of HIV for a doctor to diagnose a person at that stage of AIDS. So whether that's those other conditions, or when we talk about a person's T cells, their good blood cells, reach a certain level that's very, very low, in which a doctor would diagnose them at that stage as well. So let's talk about how HIV needs to thrive. So HIV needs two things to thrive. It needs an airtight container, which is the human body, and it needs a trading of some type of protein. So that can be blood, semen, so there's regular cum, pre-cum, vaginal fluid, or breast milk. So we talk about, what HIV needs to thrive. And so if HIV is thriving in a person's body, what are the symptoms that they're going to experience? Just like these other STIs, usually it's going to be flu-like symptoms for a small period of time. And so most people are going to think, I have a cold, it's my sinuses, I just don't feel well, I've been overworking. They take a break, they take care of themselves for that period of time. They don't go and get tested. And those brief flu-like symptoms can go away. And a person can feel perfectly fine, for a significant amount of time before other things start happening in the body, where it could be persistent diarrhea, it could be yeast infections that do not go away, and they can begin to have like these odd, little white spots or blotches of the mouth. And the virus is continuously duplicating within the body, trying to take over the host. That's the whole goal of HIV, is it wants to dominate the human body, which means that it wants to take over all your good white blood cells until, you are no longer living. But with HIV, what we see, in 2020 is that, treatment has come such a long way for people, throughout the world when it comes to, living with this virus and being able to, have healthy children and not transmit the virus from mother to child, being able to be in a relationship where you are a person who is HIV positive and your partner is a person who is HIV negative, and not being able to transmit the virus that way. And so there's a lot of progress that's being made around, HIV treatment, HIV care, and, following that, we see more progress being made with people as far as, HIV education, and HIV advocacy work. So that's HIV. And I'll talk a little bit about, when we talk about the HIV advocacy work, this is still a lot of the work that we are doing when it comes to helping people get educated and understand how HIV is not spread and what HIV is and what it is not. HIV is not a virus that is spread by casual contact. Now, when we talk about the COVID, y'all already know, stay home, stay safe, okay? So shaking hands and hugging, kissing, using public restroom when drinking fountains, tears, sweat, that mosquito bite, right? So the mosquito sucks up blood, it does not inject blood. And when we talk about HIV infection, once the blood of HIV hits the air, it dies. So HIV blood is not infectious outside of the human body. Remember, it needs the container needs that human to human, those proteins from one to another. And so people always ask, well, okay, if you can't get HIV from mosquito, how do you get the Zika and the West Nile? And the way those viruses work is, they live inside of, the mosquito. So when we talk about the saliva of the mosquito or the belly of the mosquito, those viruses survive there. HIV does not. So these are, just casual contact ways that people, are still misinformed. And so that's why, education and advocacy around, health wellness, sexual reproductive health wellness is super, super important. So let's look at some community awareness. We are almost to the promised land. We're almost done, y'all. All right, so stats. So we look at the statistics. So I kind of just dwindled down all the stats into one, just to kind of give y'all a general overview. There's a couple of different websites you can go to, you know, HIV.gov, you can go to avert, A-V-E-R-T dot, I think it's .org. You know, there's Plus Magazine. There's a lot of different resources out here where you can get additional stats. But let's look at, you know, Shelby County. We see about 1 in 90 people in Shelby County has an STI, STD. When we look at, you know, national and local numbers and people who are most highly affected, Shelby County falls into suit with all of these numbers and these affected populations. So just like throughout the United States, all these things are happening in Shelby County. MSMs are most seriously affected. So in the field of public health, we call men who have sexual encounters with other men MSMs. And so this may not be men who identify as anything on the spectrum, whether that's gay, straight, you know, bi, they may not identify those things, but they are men who have had sexual encounters with other men. And they are most seriously affected because when we look at the types of sex and the risk when it comes to HIV and these other STIs, those types of sex, so anal sex, you know, is a higher risk or exposure, potential exposure sex, because of just the way that the anus, you know, is set up and the things and the tools that you need to ensure that there isn't any tearing or ripping. You know, those things aren't always available. And when I say tools, I mean reproductive barriers, such as condoms and lube and just other things to make sure that, you know, that's a safe sex process. By race, we see that Blacks and African Americans are most highly affected. And, you know, when we look at this, you know, by race, we look at even by region, because I don't think that's added in here. But we look at by race and by region. It's not a thing of, well, you know, certain groups, certain things happen to them more than other groups, or they're doing more things than other groups. It's more so tied into social and economic, you know, challenges and determinants of health and wellness for people. And so when we look at, you know, access to, you know, good medical care, we look at access to, you know, good education revolving around your sexual health, just general health wellness. You know, when we look at, you know, just different resources that are needed to make sure that people can take best care of themselves, not better care, but best care of themselves. You know, African Americans live in communities and have barriers to, you know, those resources. And so these numbers are always going to be high in these communities until, you know, we change people's access and we have a more equitable healthcare system, education system, you know, just general, you know, community resources for these folks. When we talk about age group, we see, you know, like I stated earlier, that 15 to 24-year-old demographic, and, you know, that's a lot of that has to do around education, around, you know, young people not having correct information, being misinformed, and getting their information from pornography, getting their information from friends to friends. And so, you know, looking at that age group, you know, younger folks are most highly affected. And then those facing many social and economic challenges. So, you know, that kind of ties all back into when we look at these different particular markers of, you know, gender, race, age. We see within these particular groups of folks that these are people who are facing a lot of difficulty when it comes to, you know, having access and having the ability to, you know, really advocate for themselves when it comes to their health and wellness. So the statistics are more than just what are we doing? It's, you know, who, what, when, where do we have access to what we need to make sure that when we're doing what we're doing, we can do it to the best of our abilities. All right, methods of STI prevention. I'm gonna slide through this really quickly because y'all know this information. I'm just kidding. Okay, so here we go. Truth or nah? You can use the same condom more than once during sex. Nah, man, this is false. All right. So every time we have a sexual encounter, we need to use a new condom with each sex act. And so what does that mean? So it's if you go in one hole and you're choosing to go in another hole, we need to switch it up. All right, because what may be happening in one part of a person's body may not be happening in another part of a person's body. And so we don't want to, do some type of like cross exposure when it comes to some of these STIs. These are the things that make a condom, a male condom, an effective condom. So when we talk about latex, polyurethane, ensuring that the condoms are made out of there. So sheepskin, lambskin are not effective. Those condoms are porous, which means they breathe. They have little holes in them. Making sure that our lube is water or silicone-based lubricant. So no oils, no oils, no oils. And recognizing that, there are different types of condoms that can be used for different types of sex. All right. 9 to 10 steps. Do y'all believe that there are 9 to 10 steps that allow us that we must take to use a condom correctly? This is true. All right, my PowerPoint is ready for me to move on. Here we go. All right, so how do we use a male condom correctly? Okay, it starts before you even put the condom on, which means that you need to check the expiration date. Make sure your condom is not old. If you've been walking around that condom since middle school, it's time to let it go. Or, put it in a picture frame and just sit it right there, but you should not use that condom. All right, and then you need to do, some of these other steps that are listed here. If you can't remember these things, my homegirl Oprah, she helps us to remember the steps to put it on the condom correctly. Don't be condom, be smart. And so we already answered this question. Baby oil and Vaseline are okay to use as lubricants. No, this is false. Okay, oil breaks down the effectiveness of a latex condom. So we only want to use water-based or silicone-based lubricants to help us do what we do with the latex condoms on. All right, the female condom, also known as the FC2. This is a condom that is internal. It is a protective condom when it comes to more skin-to-skin protection than the male condom. It goes up inside of the vagina or up inside of the anus. For the vagina, it can go in there about 8 hours before sex. For anal sex, we recommend 1 hour to actually right before you actually engage in the activity for anal sex. And it's a flexi condom. It has a ring at the back of it to help it stay in place. And it's made out of nitrile, which most of the medical gloves that we are utilizing now is made out of nitrile, which is a hyperallergenic, non-latex material. And it allows it to be a more skin-to-skin to touch feel to the condom. All right, and these are just steps to use them correctly. These are dental dams, so they can be laid over the vagina or over the booty. When it comes to oral sex on those areas. It's a non-microwavable plastic wrap, and it's a flat little sheet, come in different flavors: strawberry, banana, mint, grape. Phenotypes. So when we talk about, these different skin-to-skin STIs, when we talk about the bacterial infections that can, easily reside on our skin, and we're doing things with our hands, and we like to, get a little finger activity going. These are great barriers. You can put lubricant on them. They are not lubricated. Put lubricant on them and, get to going. All right. So next steps, the who, the what, the when, where. Okay. My slide did something weird. Okay. There we go. This is what we can do. This is the correct slide. So what can I do? Your sexual health is super important. And, it is your responsibility. It is your right to, make sure that you take care of yourself so that you can have fun. All right. And, enjoy, this experience that you are about to embark upon or, will have already embarked upon when it comes to safer sexual health practices. So, getting tested, number one, is most important. Getting the correct information, getting the correct tools that you need, get information, and then support the movement. So, that's volunteering, that's, being an advocate, that's getting, young people educated, whatever you can do to help, in this process of making sure that people are able to better take care of themselves. That's what being an advocate is about. So these are some Memphis testing sites. Friends for Life, the Haven, Memphis, the Corner. Friends for Life is downtown, the Haven is downtown, the Corner is in Midtown. Of course, you got the Greater Memphis Planned Parenthood, which is right there on Poplar. You got Chip Memphis, so they actually, well, I don't know now due to the corona. I don't know if they're coming out to the homes, but they used to come out to homes and do HIV testing. Of course, the health department, you can always schedule something there. Out Memphis, I'm pretty sure you can definitely call and schedule something with them. If you have a primary care doctor, getting something on the books with them or OBGYN. All right, that's it. My name is Aramis. I hope y'all enjoyed this PowerPoint. I had a great time teaching it, and Good luck and be safe.